Hey, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Steven, and on this channel we deconstruct the best tools, strategies and frameworks to help us live happier, healthier and wealthier lives. In this video, we're going to talk about being in your 20s because, frankly, someone needs to. Anyone else think your 20s are a bit much? Sometimes referred to as the defining decade, there's an immense pressure to have things figured out. There's an expectation that you need to make these the best years of your life, and that you should somehow simultaneously experience as much as possible, make lifelong friends, find your life partner, get ahead in your career, and follow your passion, all while trying to keep some resemblance of work-life balance. It's a lot, probably too much. Too much pressure, too much stress, and too much expectation. But your 20s don't have to be like this. You can take control and run the race at your own pace. The only thing you have to do is play your own game. I think a lot of us get caught up living our lives based off the expectations of what other people think we should be doing, whether that's our friends, our family, or that weird guy on Instagram who claims to have made his money from Forex trading. Wait, you don't remember that guy? He's pretty odd, he still lives in his parents' basement, he photoshops himself posing in front of private jets. You remember that guy? Oh, that guy. At least in my experience, your 20s are filled with a lot of other people trying to push their agendas on your life. And it doesn't come from a bad place. It's typically just a way for people to justify their own decisions through you. For example, someone might have gone to university and they might be in loads of student debt and never really use that degree that they got. But they will still tell you to go to university and that you should do it because they want to justify the decision that they've made. There's this thing called choice supportive bias, and really all this means is when we make a decision, we're much more likely to show off the good elements of that decision rather than highlight the bad elements. So this gives a skewed perspective that that person made a really good decision because we're trying to justify that decision to ourselves and to other people. Like, remember that time when you bought that gimbal to get those buttery smooth shots but then never actually used it? But man, those shots are so buttery smooth. It's a good idea. Yeah, remember that? Nat Eliason has a great article called Subconscious Sabotage, and in the article he talks about how, especially when you're young, the people closest to you will try clip your wings and limit your ambition. They don't do this out of a place of malice, and it's not like they don't want to see you succeed, but subconsciously what they're trying to do when they clip your wings and limit your ambition is to help protect you, because when you don't take risks and when you don't kind of follow your own path, then they feel like you're going to be safe if you follow the herd. I'd highly recommend checking out that article because it's really interesting to dig into the psychology behind these dynamics. A huge part of your 20s are about figuring out who you are and what games you want to play in life, and doing that at your own pace. I'm still only 22, so I'm nowhere near qualified to be giving life advice or anything like that. Really, all I'm trying to do in this video is to share my experience in the last 2.5 years, and really in the last 2.5 years I've changed more at any point in my life. So hopefully you can get some value out of listening to someone in the trenches of their 20s. The first thing I wish I knew is that you and only you are responsible for how your life plays out. Now, when I first heard this idea, I was a little bit skeptical because it sounds quite scary and intimidating. But once you internalize this, it becomes completely liberating. Because once you understand that if you blame someone else, you're giving them power. So the best thing to do is to blame yourself and take full responsibility for everything that happens in your life. As soon as you blame someone else or your location, history, or even the weather, you're giving up your autonomy. You're saying that this situation would be good if only it wasn't for that one thing. But if you take full ownership over your life, you can then split life into two areas. There's the things that you cannot control, so that's when you're born, who you were born to, the location that you were born, all those kind of things. And then there's the things that you actually do control. So that's your attitude, how hard you work, and everything that is inside of your control is what you need to focus on. Taking self-ownership is probably one of the most liberating things you can possibly do. The reason you're in your current situation isn't because of the government, it isn't because of what someone else has done, it is because of what you've done. And it is pretty hard to hear this at first, but once you actually take self-ownership, it just becomes completely liberating because everything is on you and it is down to you to fix it. In the past, I didn't even realize that I used to play the victim. If I was working on a client project and something went wrong, I typically kind of tend to fall into the thought pattern that the reason this is wrong is because the client is a nightmare, or because the client didn't communicate this, or because they expected too much from the project. But I realized that even if the client was a nightmare and they were a problem, it didn't really matter because I could always be better, I could always communicate better, I could have always produced better work, I could have always managed the whole project better. So sure, they might have been a nightmare client, but it is not my responsibility for their actions. My responsibility is what's in my control, and that is how much work I put in, how much effort I put in. That is how I acted towards that client. The only thing that I control is how I act. And if a project goes wrong, then at least part of that blame goes onto me, because I could have always done something better. It doesn't matter how bad that other person was, you have ownership and you have control over how that goes. It's no use just complaining about how bad your clients are or how bad your boss is. At the end of the day, you're the one in control and you're responsible for how your life plays out. The second thing I wish I knew is that everything in life has an opportunity cost. So by watching this video, you're choosing not to do something else. So whenever you explicitly choose to do one thing, you're implicitly choosing not to do everything else. So back in school, I used to explicitly choose to play FIFA on an evening, and that meant that I implicitly chose not to do my homework. I'd then explicitly choose to do my homework on the day it was due and come down with a case of the want to dies. Now, I'm not saying that opportunity cost means that you should not watch Netflix or not play video games, because that stuff's pretty great. But it's important to remember that when you decide to do something, you're deciding not to do everything else. A great little framework that I use to make sure this is ingrained in my brain is just to think that I'm going to die at 85. I actually have like a little screensaver which kind of counts down the days. It sounds pretty morbid, but for me, it's a constant reminder that I need to be making better decisions. I need to use my time as well as I possibly can. If you knew when and where you were going to die, well, first of all, you wouldn't go there. But second, you wouldn't waste your time on things that mean nothing. You wouldn't stay at that job you hate because it pays well, and you wouldn't spend your evenings numbing your brain through scrolling TikTok. The third thing I wish I knew is that stress and anxiety are fueled by inaction. Whenever you have a problem, usually the way to solve it is through taking action, and the way to make it worse is to sit there and think about it. When I was 18, really all the way up until I was 20, I felt like I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was really tightly wound and really angst because I felt like I had to prove something. I wanted to build a profitable business, and I wanted to kind of build a portfolio of internet projects. The problem is I constantly got stuck in the planning and procrastination phase, and I wasn't taking enough action. I spent my time talking about business ideas and scheming up these different ideas and planning out how it'll all work, but I never actually built them. I'd split my time between freelancing and working on these projects. At the end of the week, I was probably putting in over 60 plus hours, and I wasn't making any progress on these projects. This led to a situation where I was really stressed and really anxious for a long period of time. If I'd have spent all of that time that I use for planning and procrastination and all that stuff, if I'd actually just spent that time building a project, I wouldn't have had all of this stress and anxiety. I found in life it's always much better to take action. So if you want to start going to the gym, it's much better to just go to the gym and get a workout in than it is to create this elaborate plan for your workout regime and how you're going to eat for the next 6 months. And if you're struggling to solve a problem, it's much better to go for a walk than to just sit there and try to think your way out of that hole. The fourth thing that I wish I knew when I turned 20 is that you can engineer your own luck. I used to think that some people were just born lucky, but then I started to realize that there was a common trait between people who were consistently lucky, and that was that they made their own luck. See, what people call lucky is usually the result of hundreds of tiny little actions. For example, let's say that this video right here goes viral. Pretty unlikely, I know, but stick with me. I've only created a few videos and I only have a few subs, so the chances of that are really slim. And if this video did go viral, it would be pretty lucky. But if I continue to make videos for the next 2, 3, 4 years, and then all of a sudden I make a video like this in 4 years' time, if that was to then go viral, it would still be lucky, but because I'd put in the reps, because I'd made loads of videos, I would have engineered my own luck. And this works in all elements of life. If you actually put in the reps and you put in the action, you can engineer your own luck by increasing your surface area to that luck. Good habits can put you in a position where luck becomes more likely. Lucky people focus on increasing their surface area to luck, and they do that by putting a lot of stuff out there and improving their skills. Whenever someone gets lucky repeatedly, the chances are they engineered their own luck, and you can do that too. The fifth thing that I wish I knew when I was 20 is that easy choices lead to a hard life, and hard choices lead to an easy life. There's this weird paradox where whenever you try to make life easier, it strangely becomes harder. Having an uncomfortable conversation is hard, but constantly running away from conflict is much harder. And consistently exercising is difficult, but constantly having no energy and feeling like shit is going to be way worse. Mastering a skill is hard, but having no skills is even harder. When you know that there's something that you should do, it's often easier to just do that thing than it is to procrastinate, to put it off and just hope that it'll go away. Easy choices are always going to have a cost. To live an easier life and a more fulfilling life, it tends to be better to make the harder choices the first time round, rather than to procrastinate and to have that miserable feeling of making the easy choice first and then realizing that you need to make the hard choice. And the sixth and final thing I wish I knew when I was 20, and I feel like everyone should just constantly remember, is that no one knows what they're doing and everything is made up. Throughout the school, you just kind of assume that things happen for a reason. There must be a reason why we're reading from this textbook rather than doing it ourselves. And there must be a reason that people commute for 2 hours a day to stare at a screen for another 8 hours. And surely there's a reason why people get into so much debt going to university for a degree that they won't use. But most things are just social constructs. They are things that people do because other people do them. It's the way things have been done and the way things are done, but it doesn't have to be done this way. Sure, social constructs are useful. There's a reason that we all drive on the same side of the road and that we don't have to scavenge for food anymore. But often just blindly following the crowd leads to an unfulfilling life. You follow the career path that your parents expect, you spend your weekends partying with friends you're not even sure you like, and you constantly feel like you could be doing more with your life. Instead, you need to embrace the fact that everything is made up and that there are no rules. Your 20s are a great time to back yourself, to take chances and build the life you want to live. You don't have to have it all figured out, but the most important thing is to play your own game. Just make choices that align with the game that you want to play, because after all, it's all made up. I'd love to know if you have any tips for your 20-year-old self down in the comments. And remember to subscribe, it's just right next to that like button, so maybe if you click the like one and then just go down to the one below and on the right hand side, then click subscribe, that would be a good idea. As always, thank you very much for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Adios!